Hey guys, my name is Ben Campbell and I'm the guy behind findawayphotography.com. Welcome to the first episode of a new series that I'm calling The Fix. If you're unfamiliar with my website, it's findawayphotography.com, and if you find yourself there, you'll see that I post a new photo every week, and I kind of tell the story behind the photo, how I took it, and how I ended up there, and some things like that. And this new series called The Fix is going to be going into those photos of the week. Probably I'll be posting a new episode every 3 or 4 weeks and kind of going through the editing. So what happens from when I take the picture, download it onto the computer, and do the editing and make a final copy. So that's kind of what I'll be doing here. I find it really helpful to watch other photographers and kind of see their workflow and what they do on the computer. And so that's kind of my idea, is just to show you guys what I do behind the scenes. So hopefully you can learn a few things from it. None of them are going to be full Lightroom tutorials or anything like that. Hopefully I'll put something together like that in the future at some point. But at the moment, the fix will just be kind of some short videos, diving into what I do, looking at one photo at a time and kind of giving you some ideas. The first one that I want to start with, first episode, kind of breaking news, you see it here first. We're going to look at photo of the week called Ice Lantern in Serendipity Cave. So this one is one that I took a few months ago. It's a cave in Canada near a town called the Crow's Nest Pass, where I grew up. And you hike up quite a ways up a mountain, and you crawl through a little hole in the rock, and you come out right over here in the corner, and you emerge into this giant room, and the whole floor of the cave is filled with ice, and yep, pretty cool. And I've got some other photos from other parts of the cave that are just as impressive, and pretty cool to be out there exploring this kind of thing, and even better to get some pictures of it. And this is one that a group of us went in there and took this photo as we were leaving. And I set my camera up on a tripod, and we put some headlamps back underneath this little hole in the ice, which kind of illuminated the entire cavern with this kind of weird blue light. So the whole thing is actually lit with headlamps. Nothing fancy here. So yeah, ended up being a kind of a cool photo. Before we do anything, we'll just take a quick look at the settings that I used, just out of curiosity. So it was a 15-second exposure, just because in those caves there is literally no light unless except for the light that you bring in yourself. So 15 seconds just to get that proper exposure. I took it at f8, trying to kind of keep it as sharp as I could. 11 millimeters, so it was a 10 to 18 millimeter lens, so I had it pretty much wide open to try to cover as much room as I could, or as much of the room as I could. And ISO somewhere around here, 250. So trying to keep the ISO as low as possible, and risk kind of having that longer shutter speed just to make that possible. But so that's where we're at with that one. So before and after, this is what the photo looked like straight out of the camera. Not much color in there, or super contrasty as well. You can, or non-contrasty, I don't know what the difference is, but one or the other. You get all these darks and then some light spots, and that's about it. So not much color, but good thing about a lot of these raw files is that you can pull that stuff out and end up with something like this. This one is definitely a little bit more unique, just because it is a caving photo. I don't do a ton of it, but definitely a challenging type of photography. So I don't have tons of experience, but the idea here is that I'll show you with the editing is trying to kind of keep it with that cavey feel. So lots of dark spots in it and dark corners. If we made it too bright or something, it might look a little funky. So The idea here is just keeping it nice and dark, but having kind of the attention drawn to this really the bright spot from the lights underneath the ice, and then of course that's me sitting there. So that'll be the idea, and keeping the color, bringing out a bit of the color in the ice for sure, but keeping it nice and dark. So yeah, with that, we'll jump into this one, and I'll kind of show you how I ended up here and all the steps between here and there. So let's dive into it. So I'm just going to press D on my keyboard to get into the develop module. And then we just start at the top, work our way down, and then do some local adjustments with those tools along the top there. And that's kind of it. So everything today will be done in Lightroom with this photo, no Photoshop or anything like that. So keeping it pretty simple. Usually with these photos, I start with a bit of a crop. I like to keep things wide, so we'll just bring this in a hair and get that kind of wide cinematic look. We'll start with that. After that, let's go and bring some more light into this. It's pretty dark. You can see, taking a quick look at the histogram, it's pushed all the way to the left. So that's kind of my fault. I could have raised the ISO or a longer exposure or whatever, but no harm done. We'll pull that out of there. I think something like that for now. The contrast, I was kind of saying before that we have all pretty much dark, light, and a bunch of gray. So we'll try to open that up a little bit, so we get a few more colors in there. So maybe something like that. That's starting to look kind of cool. You can see some details in the rock and everything like that. Let's see. And lots of these I just kind of trial and error, and lots of them I'm going to come back to later and fine tune anyways. But I think that one, if I bring that down and then you're able to see that detail in the ice, looks pretty cool. Shadows, yeah, we'll lift that a little bit, and then we're going to bring some darkness back into there with the blacks in just a second. We'll crank up this white a little bit, push the whole histogram to the right a bit. Blacks, and this is where it's going to start getting those kind of inky black corners again, make it look more like a cave, like it's supposed to. Let's see, something like that maybe. I think that looks pretty cool. And some clarity, bring out some of the clarity, just kind of brings out the contrast in those midtones. Let's see, something like that, and I'll come back and fine tune these a little bit. Some vibrance. There's not too much color in this, so we're going to try to rescue some of that. You can see the blue coming out in the ice a bit, and the blue, I was wearing these coveralls because it's quite muddy and dirty and everything, so the blue coveralls looking good. Let's see. As a general rule of thumb, I don't like to get much above 40 or 50 on vibrance, but everyone's different, so we're gonna go 51-ish on that one. Before I get too far, just take a look and see what this temperature does. I think it's a little weird having this super warm color in the cave. The cave to me is kind of cold and icy. So let's drop that back down, something like that. Bring a bit more blue into there. And moving on. I'm going to kind of skip the tone curve. I think the contrast looks pretty good. So we'll skip over that one. This is one of my favorite parts here. We're going to take a look at some of the individual colors. Unfortunately in this one there's not that much to do. You can see we've got the blues, so we can play around with that, see what a bit more saturation or less would do. I think more looks pretty good. You can see up here there's kind of some green in the rocks on that. Let's see. So if I click this one, it's going to let me kind of isolate that color. That's kind of just noise and everything, but just out of curiosity, see if we can drop that out of there. Cool, so that's all the green. So what I did there, instead, if you don't really know what the color is, that was kind of a green, blue, not really sure what it is, you click this one, and then you select which color you're after. So the color I was after was kind of in here. You click it, hold down, and you slide up or down, and it'll kind of tell you what that color is made up of. So as I move back and forth, you can see the green moving a lot and the aqua. So that color that's up in the rocks there is kind of a mix between green and aqua. So sliding down is letting me desaturate it. Up brings that saturation back in. Obviously the point here is to get rid of it as much as possible, so we're going to do that. And going back to, let's see, where are we here? Put that guy back, and back at the photo, and so it's kind of robbed those rocks of that green color, making it look a little bit more natural. And the attention here, we're trying to draw the eye to this middle part so you can see it's nice and light. We'll probably darken these corners later, but we'll just keep on moving. Really quick, let's check out the hue, see what moving the blue up or down does. I kind of like it where it was, maybe a bit to that royal blue. Nothing crazy. Take a look at luminance, see. So that's just going to brighten up the blues, turning them almost white, or bring them down to black, which makes it look not as good. So we will, something like that maybe looks kind of cool. Going back here, let's crank that up a bit. All right, moving on. Split toning, we're not going to worry about that one for this photo. And then detail. So this is the detail panel here. Super important in all photos to get your sharpening and noise reduction in that right. So we'll just do a quick one because it was such a long exposure and ISO wasn't that high, but that long exposure does bring in some noise in the dark spots. So we'll definitely pay attention to the noise. And it was taken on a tripod, so it should be, pretty stable and everything. So we'll see if we can sharpen it up a bit. So I'm going to zoom in. So let's see, if I pop this panel off, you can see I'm at 1:1. So whenever you do sharpening and noise reduction, you want to be at that 1:1 ratio. And what that does is every pixel in the photo becomes 1 pixel on the screen. And that's kind of the best way to sharpen a photo. And what we will do here, I'm going to go straight into the amount of sharpening and hold down the Option key. And that turns this to black and white. And you just kind of get it so that it looks good, but as soon as you over sharpen it, it starts to get that really grainy feel. So you're just finding the balance there. Something like that. Radius is going to show how many pixels around any of the edges get sharpened. So the smaller amount, that means that only half a pixel around every edge gets affected by the sharpening. Whereas up here, going up to that gives you a much broader sharpening. So in this one, we have a lot of kind of big fat lines, not those really sharp lines. So we're going to go somewhere around 1.7, get some sharpening in there. And then detail is just going to be all the little fine details and showing the amount of those details that are sharpened. So going down here kind of gives it a, just does the, it's tough to explain, but doesn't, just kind of does the smoother aspects of the photo, whereas here digs into all the little fine little bits. This one doesn't have too much for fine bits, so I think all I want to sharpen is kind of this lower end stuff. And then for masking, is probably the most important. I like to zoom back out to full size, grab this guy, hold down the Option key, and let's see. So starting with no masking, everything is white, so everything is being sharpened as I slide the mask up. Lightroom uses its superior intelligence to find out what should be sharpened and what not. So you can see all of the white lines are now being sharpened, and the stuff that's black isn't. So all you want to do here is find out, looking at the photo again, I don't want too much sharpening back there or in this big block of ice here. I just want these little fine lines around the rocks and around myself, and this, really sharp line there. That's what I want to be sharpened. So that's what I'm looking for. So something like this right here kind of gives me that effect. You can see it sharpening the rocks, sharpening that edge around the ice, but lots of the other stuff is black. So the idea with that is if you over sharpen areas, you risk bringing noise in. So it's always kind of a balance between noise and sharpening, but masking allows you to kind of selectively sharpen certain areas. So that's the idea there. And again, this is just really quick, just kind of running through this. It's not a full Lightroom tutorial or anything. It's more just an overview, and hopefully the more of these that I do and that you see, you'll kind of put all the pieces together, and it all makes sense. And then noise reduction, we're going to do the same thing. Zoom back in. We're at 1 to 1 again. Hold down the Option key. All that does is turn everything to black and white, because when you're sharpening, you're not actually sharpening color. You're just sharpening that, so it kind of eliminates the color from it so it doesn't distract you. And let's crank that up and make that noise in the background disappear. And again, if we do too much noise reduction, it's going to counteract that sharpening that we just did. So it's just finding that fine balance of where we're getting rid of enough noise but keeping that sharpening in. Something around 28 is going to do just fine. In this one, I'm going to leave the other ones just for this case. We'll leave that for another day. So that's enough for sharpening and noise reduction, all the boring stuff. And now we're back at it. So I think the photo is looking pretty good. It's got those dark bits like we were looking for. That color, drawing your attention to the middle. Kind of giving you that inky black cave-like look. I'm going to press Y really quick. Let's take a quick look at before and after. So this is kind of what came out of the camera. Oh no, that's my photo from before. Let's do this instead. So if I hit the backslash key, it should, no it's not. Okay, well this is, we're just going to keep moving then. I'm going to remove the chromatic aberrations, just something to do, even if they're likely not there in this photo, but it doesn't hurt. And this one is one that I don't always do. It's going to apply the profile correction for the certain lens and camera that I was using. And sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. Kind of removes that distortion and everything. And really in this one, I kind of like it more without it. So we'll do that for now. And then this is going to let us, never go this way. Unless you're going for that funky retro look, but let's avoid that for this one, and let's go left and bring that amount down, and you can see it just pulling in those corners and darkening them. We don't want to go too far, but I think just to draw the eye to the middle of the photo again, something like that looks pretty cool. We can see how far we want that to come in with the midpoint. I think something like that maybe. And for this one in particular, it just kind of gives it that idea of being in the cave, and you as the viewer can kind of see it's almost like you're seeing this with your own headlamp or whatever, bringing in those dark corners. And let's leave it at that. So that's top to bottom through the panels. Next step, what I would usually do is kind of start digging into these local adjustments. And that's going to let us isolate certain areas and bring out colors and kind of do what we were doing before, just in individual areas. So let's start with this. I'm going to go radio filter, chuck one on right here. So the last one that I was doing was bring temperature down. So to reset it, just double click effect. So it's not going to do anything. You see when I move it around, it's actually not doing anything. But let's see what happens. I've got some saved ones here, and I've got one that I made called Extra Pops. These are presets for the local adjustments that I've made before. I found myself doing this kind of adjustment all the time, Extra Pop, so I added a preset for it. That's the settings, so you're more than welcome to steal them, write them down, or whatever you want to do, and then make your own preset. All you do is you kind of change those adjustments, drop this down, save current settings as new preset, name it whatever you want, and that's all there is to it. And then it'll be here when you're looking for it again. So you can see I've made a couple of these, nothing crazy, but something to get me started. This one I think looks pretty rough on that. It's kind of bringing in too much contrast on that, so I'm actually just going to reset it. And let's see what we can do. Just to brighten it up, let's drop that contrast again. Brighten things up a bit. Just out of curiosity, what happens if we open up that exposure? Yeah, something like that. Lift those shadows just a hair. Actually, kind of like the way it makes me look a little bit more enshadowed sitting there on the rock, so I'll drop that down a bit. Highlights, I kind of like that nice bright look there, so I'll crank that up just a bit. Add a bit of saturation in there for the blue. Bring that out. I'm going to widen that. Let's try something like that. And clarity might have a bit of an effect. So if I go too bright, it looks like we're on drugs, and that kind of gives it that blurry look. But we'll go, yeah, a bit of clarity wouldn't hurt. So we'll try something like that. Alright, so that's one local adjustment. I might brush in a bit of color to that ice. See if I can just isolate that ice. I could do it with the radio filter or whatever, but we're just going to brush it in, see what happens. We'll leave the... Actually, no, we're going to reset that. So if I press O, I'll be able to see where I'm painting. Let's see what have I got here. Let's bring flow down a little bit. So this is just setting up my brush. We're going to have lots of feather on that and something like that. Check auto mask, and then we'll just kind of just do a really rough brush in here, see what's going on. Something like that'll work, I think. Looking good, looking good. Press O again, hide that overlay, and now we've kind of isolated that area. A bit more in there. And let's see if we can bring out, see what clarity does to bring in those features in the ice. So you can see if I go too far, it again makes it look kind of strange. So maybe a bit of clarity, bring out those details. Crank up the saturation. Get just a bit of blue. Don't want to overdo it, so we'll just do a little bit at a time. And playing with the temperature to bring that kind of like that really blue look, bringing out the natural color of the ice. Yeah, something like that. I think it's looking pretty good. Just out of curiosity, you can hit this button down here, turn it on and off. You can see I've just brought in a bit of detail into there and just a bit of color. So yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. And next step, I'm going to try this graduated filter or something. I don't know what you want to call it. I'm going to drag it up from the bottom and bring in a bit of darkness just to there. We've already got really dark corners. But I'm just going to reset this, drop this down. I've got one here just called darken bottom. All it does is drop that. Drops the exposure a little bit. Let's try that. And that's just going to kind of give that look, pulling your eye past the bottom right into the photo. And while I'm at it, I'm going to reverse the effect kind of, and I'm going to throw a radio filter just on these rocks. See what happens. This isn't quite what I did on the original photo that I'd showed you before, but it, every time is a little bit different and gives you a basic idea of kind of what I'm thinking about when I'm going through these photos. And all I'm doing here is trying to bring out that reflection of the ice and give it a little bit of pop. And so this was actually really cool. So you walk over these rocks when you're crawling into the cave, and it's this tiny little hole. You pop your head up over this rock and climb over it, and this whole floor here is actually ice. It looks like water the way it's reflecting, but it was summer. The ice stays in the cave all summer, but it just melts a little bit as the temperatures outside warm up, and a bit of that warm air comes in. and it creates this little sheen of water on top. So it is ice, and all these rocks are actually stuck into the ice, but there's that little sheen of water that makes it actually look like the whole thing is water, or looks like dirt with some water on it, but it's actually all ice, just with a little thin layer of water, giving you that cool reflection. So a little fun fact for the day. Back to what we were doing, which I can't really remember, but we'll figure it out. Yes, brightening up the floor. Okay. Let's see, bring up a bit of highlights in there. What are we doing? How does that look? So that's off. Turn it back on. I think that's kind of doing the trick. And again, I'm trying to keep this really dark corner down here. Cool thing with Lightroom 6 is you can go run over here, hit brush, and that'll give you those same settings, just let you brush in a little bit more that the filter's not covering. I'm just going to hit that rock quick, see if we can bring out a bit of the rock, but everything else looks pretty good, I think. So let's see again, that's on, back on and off, and I think that's about good. Whoop. So we're done with that. So taking a quick look at this again, just to bring a bit of darkness back into there. Let's see. It's gonna be lazy, click that one on, and click and drag that in just to darken that little bit of rock. Rotate that guy around a bit. That's about it. Let's see what happens. I hit Y, and usually that gives me before and after. But in this case, the before is my photo from that I had edited earlier. So it's kind of giving me a weird one, but you can see what I had edited earlier compared to what I've got now. My earlier one was definitely warmer and that kind of thing, so a different look altogether, but this is kind of what I arrived at today. This is what I arrived at the other day. Gives you, two different ideas anyways. I might just brighten it up a little bit. If I was going to put this on my website as a photo of the week or something, sometimes these dark ones don't really pop or anything, so I over brighten them a little bit, and that's kind of what this was, just to make it pop a little bit more when it's on the website, or if you're to print it to put it on a wall or something. But in this case, looking at it on the computer screen, I think the darker actually looks kind of cool. Can half expect to see Gollum or something climbing out of one of those corners with the way this one's looking. So one more click in here, make sure everything's looking good, don't have too much noise or anything like that messing up the photo. So that's click out of there. That's about it. So let's go full screen, see what we're looking at. So that's what we've arrived at. So I'm gonna go, let's see, if I click here, I'm gonna roll down to the bottom and see what it looked like. I'm gonna do this. Back into the develop module. Now if I hit Y, you can see what the very original photo would look like. So it looks something like this. So really dark and everything, but with Lightroom and with the way these raw cameras or raw files capture so much data, we're able to pull it out and bring out that color even though it was pitch dark and just lit by headlamps. So pretty cool. So we'll leave you with that one today. So this is what we edited, and gives you kind of the steps that I usually go through with those, starting out with just the basics, going down the right side of the develop module, top to bottom, skipping a few here and there, depends on how into the photo we're going, and then after that digging into these local adjustments. And sometimes I get halfway down here and I start with the local adjustments, just kind of depends on the day, depends what I had for breakfast, that kind of thing. So but yeah, a little bit of, we got into brushes a little bit, some radio filters, graduated filters, did a bit of cropping right at the beginning. Sometimes you can take a look at the crop again, see what we ended up with. I think we did pretty good. Could bring that in just a hair more if we wanted to, but all in all, I think it's looking pretty good. so that is the end of the first episode of The Fix. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and stick around for more. I'm sure there will be more to come, and yeah, and I'll just every 3 to 4 weeks kind of thing put up a new video of me going through an old or a new photo of the week, one that's been put up in the past. And if you have any that you want to see, definitely leave me a comment or send me an email or something like that, and I'm happy to go through any of them. I just kind of pick the ones that I feel like revisiting and going through, and hopefully these just get better and better the more I do, and hopefully you find them helpful, because that's the idea here. So yeah, with that, I'll leave you with this photo for the day. I think it's called Ice Lantern in Serendipity Cave, and I'll see you next time for the second episode of The Fix, and we'll leave it at that. Thanks a lot for stopping by.